We called it Viridia, a name born from a hope so desperate it felt like a prayer. On the scarred face of a moon orbiting a gas giant, we were building a garden, a testament to human resilience. We were a terraforming colony, pioneers at the fringe of the stellar compact's vast, glittering expanse. For generations, our lives had been tethered to their technology, a delicate symbiosis we mistook for partnership. The atmospheric processors that spun breathable air from toxic gases, the biofilters that purified our water, the very nutrient synthesizers that fed our children, all of it came from them. The supposedly benevolent council of elder species who saw us as promising, if volatile, newcomers. We were their project, a testament to their magnanimity, and we were grateful. We worked the stubborn soil, raised our families under the eerie green glow of the gas giant, and never once questioned the invisible strings that held our world together. My world had been defined by that fragile balance. As a lead bioengineer, I was a steward of our manufactured Eden. My days spent analyzing chlorophyll uptake and microbial health. I knew every flaw in the system, every precarious variable that could tip our world into catastrophe. I had already paid the price for one such failure years ago, when a cascade malfunction in an early atmospheric dome had stolen my wife, leaving me with nothing but a cold fury and an obsessive devotion to the colony's survival. Her memory was a ghost in the hum of the life support, a constant reminder that our existence was a house of cards built on borrowed tech. Then the blight came. It started subtly, a strange, crystalline shimmer on the leaves of the hydroponic farms, a faint, metallic tang in the recycled air. It was not of our world. Its biology was alien, aggressive, and horrifyingly efficient. It didn't just kill, it converted. Lush, green sectors of the biodomes would wilt overnight, replaced by fractal, glass-like structures that pulsed with a faint, sickly light. Leaching toxins into the very bedrock of our colony was an ecological plague, a terraforming virus in reverse, and it was spreading faster than we could comprehend. We threw everything we had at it, our best scientists working in frantic, sleep-deprived shifts. But our tools were like trying to stop a tidal wave with a teacup. We were fighting a ghost, an enemy whose very nature was beyond our understanding. Our only hope was the compact. We sent the distress call, a desperate plea for help packed with every bit of data we had gathered, confident that our patrons would not abandon their prize project. The response was faster than we could have ever imagined, and colder than the vacuum between worlds. There would be no aid ships, no quarantine specialists, no miracle cure. Instead, Misukoi, they declared Viridia a level 7 biohazard, a contagion beyond saving. They called it the Cinder Protocol, a name that would be forever burned into the memory of every soul who survived. From our observation domes, we watched it happen. A fleet of compact ships, sleek and silent as sharks, appeared at the edge of our system. They didn't hail us, didn't offer a single word of explanation or solace. They simply deployed the barrier. Sherds of golden light erupted around our moon, moving together into an impenetrable cage of kinetic energy, a celestial prison sealing us in with our doom. Their message was brutally clear. We were a failed experiment, a contamination to be cauterized from the galaxy. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. The shimmering golden wall in our sky was a tombstone, and we were being buried alive. Panic was a virus in itself, spreading through the colony's corridors with blinding speed. The carefully maintained order of our society fractured. People who had been neighbors for years now saw each other as rivals for dwindling resources. The atmospheric processors, now under relentless assault from the Blight's corruption, began to falter. The air thinned, carrying the scent of our own decay. Our medical bays filled with the gasping victims of hypoxia and toxic exposure. The governor, a pompous, compact appointee, tried to placate the masses with hollow speeches about diplomatic channels and imminent rescue, but his words were ashes in the mouths of a dying people. We all saw the truth in the sky. We were alone. That betrayal ignited the cold fury I had carried since my wife's death into a raging inferno. I would not let my daughter, Elara, die gasping for air in this cage. I would not let the arrogant, callous gods of the Compact write our obituary. They saw us as a plague, a problem to be erased. They had forgotten what humanity was capable of when its back was against the wall, and they had left us to die. But they had made a grave miscalculation. They had given us nothing left to lose. While the governor preached faith in our executioners, I started digging. I tore through Viridia's archives, through old, encrypted data logs from the colony's founding, searching for anything, any forgotten piece of research the Compact might have overlooked or suppressed. And there, buried under layers of security protocols, I found it Project Chimera. It was a ghost, a forbidden science, a field of research so radical the Compact had banned it galaxy-wide, deeming it an abomination, a perversion of natural evolution. The project's original goal had been audacious to create a new breed of colonist, one who wouldn't need the crutch of terraforming. It was a study in symbiotic integration, a way to weave the DNA of native extremophiles into the human genome, allowing us to adapt to hostile environments rather than changing the environments themselves. To the Compact, with its rigid doctrines of biological purity, it was the ultimate heresy. To me, it was a key. It was our only way out. We couldn't fix our world. Not anymore. The Blight was winning. But if we couldn't save our Eden, perhaps we could adapt to survive in the hell it was becoming. I didn't act alone. I found others who shared my rage, whose despair had hardened into resolve. Kalen, the colony's security chief, a mountain of a man whose quiet stoicism hid a deep well of grief for his own family, lost in the early riots. Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant young geneticist, her genius dismissed by the Compact bureaucracy, now burning with a fierce desire to prove them wrong. And Jax, a cynical, foul-mouthed engineer who could coax miracles from dying machinery and who trusted the Compact as far as he could throw one of their gilded ships. Together, we became a conspiracy, a silent rebellion operating in the forgotten tunnels beneath the dying colony. We commandeered a sealed, deep earth biolab, a relic from the colony's early days, and began our blasphemous work. The air outside grew thinner with each passing day, the golden cage in the sky a constant, mocking reminder of the sentence passed upon us. We worked against the ticking clock of our own extinction. The science was terrifying, a tightrope walk over an abyss of unforeseen consequences. We were attempting to rewrite the very definition of what it meant to be human. Finally, the time came. We had a viable gene-splicing agent, a retrovirus designed to carry a new set of instructions into a human host. But in theory was one thing, practice was another. We needed a volunteer, someone willing to risk a gruesome death for a sliver of a chance at survival. Kalen didn't hesitate. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a pain I knew all too well, and simply nodded. "I've already buried everyone I love, Doc," he said, his voice a low rumble. "There's nothing left for this world to take from me. Let's see what we can take back." The procedure was a descent into hell. We strapped him to a reinforced medical table as his body convulsed, his temperature soaring to levels that should have been fatal. We were introducing the genetic code of a native life form we had discovered, a silicon-based lichen that not only survived in the blight-ravaged zones, but seemed to thrive, drawing energy directly from the toxic crystalline structures. We were merging man with the monster that was killing our world. For 3 days, he screamed, his body a battlefield where his own biology waged a war against our desperate cure. Then there was silence. We thought we had lost him, but as Lena and I stood over his still form, we saw the change. A subtle, pearlescent sheen spread across his skin, hardening into a flexible, chitinous layer. The monitors, which had been a chaotic scrawl of flatlining vital signs, began to register a new, steady rhythm. His chest rose and fell, but he wasn't breathing our filtered air anymore. The bioscanners showed his lungs were restructuring, developing a new set of filaments capable of filtering nitrogen and methane, of extracting oxygen from the very poisons that were killing the rest of us. He opened his eyes. They were no longer the simple brown I remembered. They were silver, metallic, and held an unnerving, predatory focus. He sat up, the restraints snapping like thread, and looked at his own hands, now coated in that crystalline armor. A low, resonant sound, half growl, half word, rumbled in his transformed chest. "More," he said. He was the first of our new kind. He was no longer just a man. He was a living weapon, a survivor forged in the crucible of betrayal. Looking at him, I felt a chilling cocktail of triumph and terror. I had pulled my people back from the brink of extinction, but in doing so, I had unleashed something new upon the universe. We were no longer the victims cowering in our cage. We were becoming something else, something the Compact would not recognize, something they could not control. They had wanted to erase us, to let us fade into a forgotten footnote. But we weren't going to die. We were going to adapt. We were going to survive. And one day, we were going to break out of our cage and show our creators the true meaning of the word blight. The quiet doctor in his lab coat was gone. In his place stood a monster maker. And this was only the beginning. Kalen became our dark messiah, the proof of concept walking among a dying populace. His presence in the cramped corridors of our underground sanctuary was a constant, unsettling reminder of the price of survival. He moved with an unnatural grace, his silver eyes scanning every shadow, his senses now attuned to frequencies of sound and light far beyond our own. He didn't need to eat our synthesized rations anymore. Lena's scans showed his body had become a bizarrely efficient bioreactor, capable of drawing sustenance from the trace minerals in the air and the ambient energy emitted by our failing power core. He was a creature of the blight now, a native in a land that was killing the rest of us. His transformation polarized what was left of our society. For some, he was a miracle, a symbol of hope in the suffocating dark. They saw the pearlescent armor on his skin and saw a shield. They saw his silver eyes and saw a future. But for many others, he was an abomination, the governor, clinging to the shreds of his authority, branded us heretics and monster makers. He used the colony-wide comms to preach of biological purity and the sanctity of the human form, his voice a reedy, desperate thread against the growing hum of our generators and the whispers of fear. He stoked the flames of paranoia, painting us as a cult that had embraced the very plague that was destroying us. He wasn't entirely wrong. We had made a pact with the devil to escape our tomb. The transformation became the ultimate test of faith, not in a god, but in the cold, brutal logic of survival. We didn't have enough of the retrovirus for everyone. Not yet. We had to be selective, choosing those who were strong enough to withstand the agonizing metamorphosis. Jax, our cynical engineer, was one of the next. He took the injection with a grimace and a curse, and for 4 days, his fevered screams echoed through the medbay. He emerged scarred and hardened, his forearms now coated in a jagged, obsidian-like plating, his hands capable of interfacing directly with failing systems, feeling the flow of energy as if it were blood in his own veins. Lena, driven by a fierce, intellectual curiosity, followed soon after, her transformation more subtle but no less profound. Her neural pathways resequenced, allowing her to process data at a speed that left our best computers in the dust. She could see the math in the Blight's fractal patterns, the horrifying, beautiful logic in its spread. One by one, our numbers grew. We were becoming a tribe of monsters, a new species born in the twilight of the old. While the governor railed against us from his command center in the upper levels, we were busy reclaiming our world. Kalen and his new cadre of chimeras could walk on the surface without suits. Audits. They moved through the blighted zones, the crystalline forest that had once been our hydroponic farms, with an eerie sense of belonging. They were our scouts, our warrior, our first line of defense against a world that had turned on us. And we soon discovered that we needed a defense. The Blight was not a passive force. It reacted to our presence, to the new energy signature of the chimeras. The crystalline structures began to shift, to grow in new, predatory ways. Crystalline shards, sharp as razors, would spontaneously erupt from the ground. Worse, smaller, mobile constructs began to appear skittering. Insectoid things made of the same shimmering glass that would attack any source of heat or movement that wasn't of the Blight. Our war for survival had entered a new, bloody phase. My personal hell, however, was quieter and far more intimate. It was the sound of my daughter's ragged breathing in the dim light of our living quarters. Alara was only 10, and the thinning air was taking its toll. She was pale, listless, a fragile flower wilting in a poisoned garden. Every labored breath she took was a knife in my heart. I, the man who had unleashed this monstrous cure upon our people, was terrified to give it to my own child. How could I subject her to that agony? How could I watch her transform into one of them, into a silver-eyed stranger? What if the process killed her? The choice was a paralysis of the soul. To do nothing was to condemn her to a slow, suffocating death. To act was to risk losing her in a fire of my own making, to erase the last piece of her mother I had left in this world. The conflict came to a head on the 87th day of the Cinder Protocol. The main atmospheric processor in Sector Gamma suffered a catastrophic failure. A cascade of alarms shrieked through the colony, a death rattle we had all been dreading. The air quality plummeted, and the governor's carefully constructed facade of control shattered. Riots erupted. His security forces, their loyalty already frayed, were overwhelmed by desperate mobs clawing at the doors of the more stable sectors. He sealed himself in the command tower, a coward king in a crumbling castle, and broadcast one final, insane message, declaring martial law and ordering the execution of all abominations on sight. That was his final mistake. Kalen heard the broadcast from a blighted biodome, standing under the sickly light of the crystalline trees. I saw the recording later. He didn't speak, didn't issue a command. He simply turned his head, and the half-dozen chimeras with him turned in unison, their silver eyes all locking onto the distant spire of the command tower. It was time to end the farce. The assault was less a battle and more a culling. The governor's remaining guards were still human, still breathing the failing air, their movements sluggish, their aim unsteady. Kalen and his warriors moved through them like ghosts, a blur of pearlescent armor and obsidian blades. They didn't use plasma rifles. Their own bodies were the weapons. They scaled the walls of the tower, their hardened limbs finding purchase on the sheer metal, and shattered the armored windows of the command deck with their bare fists. I was in the medbay, monitoring Ilara's failing vitals, when Kalen's voice, that's now a low, resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate in my bones, came over the comm. "It's done," he said. "The tower is ours. The colony is ours." He had deposed a tyrant, but a new, more terrifying question now hung in the poisoned air. What kind of society would we build on the ashes of the old one that night? I made my choice. I carried Ilara's frail body to the lab, her head resting on my shoulder, her breaths so shallow I could barely feel them. Lena was there, her eyes filled with a sad, knowing compassion. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. I looked down at my daughter, at the faint blue tinge on her lips, and the last of my hesitation burned away. My humanity, my fear, my sentimentality, none of it mattered more than her life. "I am," I said, my voice hoarse. "Save her." I held her hand as the retrovirus entered her system, and the fever took her and her small body began to convulse. I forced myself to watch, to bear witness to my terrible, necessary choice. For 2 days, I did not leave her side. I listened to her cries, which slowly changed from the sounds of a human child in pain to something alien, something guttural and resonant. On the 3rd day, she went still. The silence was absolute. My heart stopped. But then her eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes, once the warm, familiar brown of her mother's, were now a luminous, brilliant emerald green. A network of fine, crystalline veins pulsed with a soft light just beneath her skin. She sat up, not with the weakness of a convalescent child, but with a fluid, predatory power that sent a chill down my spine. She looked at me, her head tilted, and for a terrifying moment, I saw no recognition in those glowing emerald eyes. Then, she spoke, her voice a soft, melodic chime that was both hers and not. "Father," she said, "I can breathe." In that moment, watching my transformed daughter drink in the toxic air as if it were the sweetest nectar, I understood. We had survived. We had shed our fragile human skins and embraced the monster. We were the children of the blight, the inheritors of a poisoned paradise. We had conquered our moon, but the golden cage still hung in our sky, a monument to the gods who had abandoned us. Survival was no longer the goal. The governor was dead. Our people were changing, and the blight was now our cradle, not our grave. A new purpose began to crystallize in the hearts of our Chimera clan, a cold, hard resolve that mirrored the crystalline forests outside. We would not be content to merely live in our prison. We would get stronger. We would master this new symbiosis. We would turn our blighted moon into a fortress, a laboratory, a shipyard, and one day, we would shatter that golden cage. We would rise from our tomb and carry our own special kind of blight out into the stars, to the doorsteps of the Stellar Compact. They had wanted to watch us die. Instead, they had created their reckoning. The years that followed were a blur of brutal, relentless adaptation. Time lost its conventional meaning, marked not by days or weeks, but by the slow, inexorable transformation of our entire society. We were no longer a colony, we were a chrysalis. Under the silent watch of the Compact's golden cage, humanity on Viridia was being reforged in a crucible of alien biology and sheer, unadulterated will. The governor's command tower, once a symbol of compact authority, became the heart of our new world. We called it the Spire. Jax, his obsidian-plated hands now capable of manipulating energy fields with surgical precision. gutted the old systems and wove them into something new. He integrated our technology with the blight itself, creating a bioorganic network that pulsed with a life of its own. Crystalline conduits snaked through the walls, glowing with a suave internal light, carrying power and data with an efficiency that dwarfed anything the compact had given us. The spire was no longer just a building. It was alive, and it was the nerve center of our burgeoning hive. My role shifted from bioengineer to something far more ambiguous. I became the architect of our evolution, guiding the genetic path of our people. The retrovirus was refined, stabilized. The process of transformation made less a horrifying ordeal and more a controlled metamorphosis. We learned to tailor the genetic splice, coaxing out specific adaptations. Some of our people developed chameleonic skin that could mimic the shimmering, fractal patterns of the blight, making them all but invisible in the crystalline forests. Others developed heightened auditory senses, able to hear the subtle stress fractures in the distant glacier fields or the whisper of an approaching crystalline hunter. We were specializing, becoming a society of purpose-built survivors, each individual a unique and vital part of the whole. Alara became something extraordinary. The emerald light that pulsed beneath her skin was a sign of a unique symbiosis. She developed an empathic connection to the blight, a strange, intuitive understanding of its rhythms and intentions. She could feel the shifts in the crystalline matrix, predict the emergence of new, hostile life forms, and even soothe the aggressive tendencies of the skittering constructs that roamed our world. She became our seer, our oracle, her melodic voice often the first warning of a coming danger or the key to a new discovery. She was a child no longer, but a bridge between what we had been and what we were becoming. Her innocence was gone, replaced by an ancient, unsettling wisdom in her glowing eyes. She was a constant, beautiful, and heartbreaking reminder of the humanity we had sacrificed at the altar of survival. Our greatest challenge and our greatest project was the Forge. Deep within the moon's core, in a vast cavern of geothermal vents and rare metallic veins, Jax conceived of our masterpiece, a shipyard. It was an insane, audacious dream. We had no schematics for interstellar drives, no knowledge of advanced weapon systems. All we had was salvaged compact tech, our own burgeoning bioengineering, and the unique properties of the blight itself. We began to grow our ships. It started with Lena's breakthrough discovery that certain crystalline formations, when subjected to a specific resonant frequency, could be shaped and hardened into a material that was lighter and stronger than any alloy we knew. We learned to cultivate these formations, guiding their growth around salvaged structural frames, weaving them with the living conduits of our bio network. Our ships wouldn't be machines of dead metal and wires. They would be living organisms, part crystal, part machine, part blight. Kalen, as the undisputed leader of our security and military forces, oversaw the training of our first pilots and soldiers. His chimeras were no longer just survivors. They were warriors. They learned to fight in zero gravity, their armored bodies perfectly suited to the vacuum. They developed tactics that were fluid, predatory, and utterly alien to the rigid doctrines of conventional space warfare. They trained in the crystalline canyons of the moon's surface, hunting the deadliest of the Blight's native predators, honing their skills against an enemy that was as relentless and unforgiving as the universe itself. We were no longer preparing for defense. We were preparing for an exodus. We were preparing for war. The Compact, for their part, seemed to have forgotten us. The Golden Barrier remained, a silent, impassive monument to their decision. Perhaps they believed we had simply withered and died, Another failed experiment swept under the galactic rug. Their arrogance was a gift. It gave us time. It allowed us to grow in the dark, to nurture our rage, to build our arsenal, to become the nightmare they could not even conceive of. Our society had no currency, no politics in the old sense. Our value was determined by our function, by our contribution to the singular, unifying goal breaking the cage. The concept of individuality began to blur. We were becoming a collective consciousness, our thoughts and goals increasingly intertwined through the bio-network. Alara was often the focal point of this connection, her empathic abilities acting as a psychic switchboard, allowing for a level of coordination and unity that was both incredibly efficient and deeply unsettling. There were moments, late in the moon's long nights, when I would stand on the spire's observation deck and look out at the transformed world below. The landscape, once a testament to our failure, was now a garden of terrifying beauty. The crystalline trees pulsed with a soft, internal light. The air hummed with the energy of our hive, and in the distance, I could see the glow of the forge, the birthplace of our future vengeance. In those quiet moments, the ghost of my old life, of my wife, of the man I used to be, would visit me. I would feel a pang of profound loss for the simple, fragile humanity we had left behind. We had traded sunsets for the cold glow of crystal, laughter for the hum of the network, individuality for the strength of the collective. Had the price been too high, the question was a luxury we could not afford. The answer was always there, in the ragged scar in my heart, in the faces of my transformed people, in the emerald glow of my daughter's eyes. The answer was in the golden cage that still mocked us from the sky. We had not chosen this path, but we would see it through to its bitter, bloody end. The day the first ship was completed was a day of silent, solemn ceremony. We called it the Shard. It was not a thing of beauty by any conventional standard. It was a jagged, asymmetrical vessel of black and gray crystal, looking more like a fragment of a shattered asteroid than a starship. It had no viewports, no external lights. It was a weapon, pure and simple, its crystalline hull designed to absorb and refract sensor scans, its interior a living labyrinth of bioorganic systems. Kalen stood before it, flanked by his most elite warriors, his silver eyes reflecting the ship's dark, predatory form. There were no speeches, no applause. There was only a shared, silent understanding that passed through the network, a wave of cold, hard resolve. This was the key. This was the beginning of the end of our exile. The Shard's primary weapon was something born from Jax's most fevered dreams and Alara's empathic connection to the Blight. It wasn't a laser or a missile. It was a resonance cannon. It fired a focused wave of the same frequency we used to shape the crystal, a wave designed not to destroy, but to convert. It could, in theory, trigger a cascade reaction in the molecular structure of an enemy ship's hull, transforming it into the same unstable, crystalline material as the Blight itself. It was a weapon that didn't just kill, it spread our plague. Our target was singular, obvious, the barrier. For years, it had been the immovable object, the symbol of our imprisonment. Now, we had our unstoppable force. We moved the Shard into position, our entire colony connected, watching through the ship's senses. I stood on the spire's bridge, Alara at my side, her hand in mine. She closed her eyes, her mind reaching out, interfacing with the ship, guiding the flow of energy to the cannon. "Now," she whispered, her voice echoing not just in the room, but in the minds of every soul on Viridia. A beam of pure, silent, invisible energy shot from the Shard. It struck the golden cage, And for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The barrier shimmered, its light intensifying as it absorbed the energy. A wave of doubt, of fear, rippled through our collective consciousness. Had we failed? Had we dreamed too big? Then, a flicker. A single point of golden light on the barrier turned a sickly, crystalline white. A spider web of fractal cracks spread out from that point, not like shattering glass, but like a growing infection. The golden energy was being consumed, converted, its ordered matrix collapsing into the beautiful, chaotic patterns of the blight. A cheer, raw and primal, erupted through the network, a sound no one on Viridia had made in years. It was the sound of a tomb cracking open, the sound of prisoners tasting freedom for the first time, the sound of a reckoning, long overdue, finally beginning. The cage was breaking, and we were about to be unleashed. The shattering of the Cinder Protocol barrier was not an explosion, it was a disease taking hold. The golden energy field, for so long the impassive, invincible wall of our prison, decayed before our eyes. The crystalline infection spread, consuming the light, turning it into a brittle, leprous latticework of dull, gray crystal. Then, with a slow, silent groan that we felt more in our bones than heard with our ears, the entire structure crumbled, disintegrating into a cloud of glittering, harmless dust that caught the light of the distant sun. For the first time in a generation, the sky above Viridia was clear, open, and infinite. The silence that followed was profound, a collective, galaxy-wide breath held in anticipation. We didn't cheer again. The initial, primal roar of triumph had given way to a cold, razor-sharp focus. Freedom was not the goal. It was merely the opening of the cage door. The real work was about to begin. Our first move was one of calculated, brutal efficiency. We had spent years in our gilded cage, but we had not been deaf. We had listened. Jax had long ago converted a deep space comms array into a passive listening post, siphoning off the endless streams of compact data that flowed through the sector. We knew their shipping lanes, their patrol routes, their vulnerabilities. We knew that a convoy of freighters, fat with refined ores and atmospheric processor components, was due to pass through the neighboring Helios system in less than 3 rotations. They were civilian ships, lightly armed, confident in the peace enforced by the Compact's iron fist. They would be our first message. Kalen took the Shard, along with 2 smaller, faster vessels we had grown, the Splinters. I watched the operation from the Spire's command center, the battle data streaming directly into my mind through the bio-network. It was a chillingly intimate perspective, seeing the universe through the cold, silver eyes of a hunter. The compact ships appeared as glowing motes of light, serene and oblivious. Kalen didn't hail them. He didn't offer a chance to surrender. Mercy was a currency we no longer possessed. The Splinters, their chameleonic hulls perfectly mimicking the void, flanked the convoy, disabling their engines and communications with surgical strikes from short-range energy dampeners. The freighters were left dead in the water, their crews scrambling in confused panic. Then, the Shard emerged from the shadow of a nearby moon, its jagged, crystalline form a thing of pure malevolence against the backdrop of stars. The resonance cannon fired. We watched through the Shard's senses as the wave of pure, crystalline blight washed over the lead freighter. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The ship's smooth, metallic hull blistered and warped. Crystalline growths, like cancerous tumors, erupted from its surface. Within seconds, the entire vessel was a grotesque, shimmering sculpture, its internal systems shattered, its life support gone, its crew flash fossilized in a tomb of their own making. The remaining freighters, their crews witnessing this silent, incomprehensible horror, began broadcasting frantic, incoherent distress signals. Kalen let them. He wanted the compact to hear their terror. He wanted them to see what had crawled out of the grave they had dug for us. We didn't destroy the other ships. We boarded them. Kalen's Chimera warriors, clad in their bioorganic armor, breached the hulls and moved through the corridors with a speed and ferocity that left the human and alien crews paralyzed with fear. There was no massacre. There was only a cold, efficient takeover. The message was clear: your technology, your resources, your people, they belong to us now. The captured freighters were brought back to Viridia, their crews interred in repurposed habitat domes. They were not mistreated, but they were studied. Lena and her team of xenobiologists began the grim work of understanding our enemy, analyzing their physiology, their psychology, their weaknesses. They were no longer our peers, no longer fellow members of a galactic community. They were specimens. This act of piracy, this brutal, unprovoked attack, sent a shockwave through the stellar compact. The initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a surge of righteous fury. The forgotten, plague-ridden colony of Viridia was not dead. It was alive. It was hostile, and it had somehow developed a terrifying new form of weaponry. An emergency session of the Compact Council was convened. We listened to their frantic, indignant broadcasts, a grim satisfaction spreading through our collective consciousness. They called us monsters, savages, a rogue blight that needed to be exterminated for the good of the galaxy. They had learned nothing. They dispatched a fleet. It was a peace enforcement armada, a collection of 10 warships from 3 of the Council's most martial species, the Stoic, insectoid Thrax, the arrogant, avian Xylos, and the reptilian, honor-bound Cathar. It was a show of force, designed to intimidate and overwhelm. They expected to find a single primitive ship crewed by desperate survivors. They had no concept of what we had become. We knew they were coming. Our listening posts had tracked their mobilization from the moment it began. We did not hide. We did not run. We chose the battlefield, the Viridian asteroid belt, a treacherous, chaotic graveyard of shattered planetoids and swirling dust clouds. It was a place where sensors were unreliable, where maneuverability was paramount, and where our chameleonic hulls would give us the ultimate advantage. Alara was the key to our strategy. From the spire, she connected her mind to the entire asteroid field, her empathic senses extending for millions of kilometers. She could feel the gravitational eddies, the subtle shifts in the rock and dust. The entire field became an extension of her will, a weapon of unimaginable scale. The compact fleet arrived with all the pomp and arrogance of a reigning monarch. They entered the belt in a tight, disciplined formation, their shields glowing, their weapons ports open, broadcasting demands for our unconditional surrender. They were answered with silence. Then, Alara struck. With a single, focused thought, she shifted the trajectory of a rogue planetoid the size of a small city. It tumbled out of the dust clouds, its path perfectly calculated, slammed into the lead Xylos cruiser. The ship's shields flared and died, its hull crumpling like paper, before it was obliterated in a silent, blossoming flower of fire and debris. Panic erupted in the compact fleet. Their formation broke as they scattered, their commanders screaming orders over their comms, trying to make sense of an attack that had no origin point, no energy signature. It was as if the universe itself had turned against them. That was when our ships descended upon them. The Shard and the Splinters, hidden in the shadow of asteroids, decloaked and opened fire. Kalen's tactics were a thing of brutal artistry. He used the chaos of the asteroid field to his advantage, striking from multiple angles at once, never allowing the enemy to regroup. But it was the resonance cannon that truly broke them. The shard targeted the flagship of the Cathar, a massive, lumbering dreadnought. The blight wave hit its engines, and the crystalline infection spread through the ship's power core. The dreadnought didn't just die, it became a bomb. It detonated in a cataclysmic explosion of crystalline shrapnel, each fragment a seed of the blight that tore through 2 of the Thrax destroyers. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in less than an hour. Of the 10 warships sent to exterminate us, 7 were destroyed, and 3 were crippled, their crews taken captive. We suffered minimal damage. The victory was absolute, terrifying in its completeness. The footage of the battle, captured by our own drones, was broadcast on every open channel in the sector. We edited it, spliced it with recordings of the Compact's original Cinder Protocol declaration, and ended it with a simple and chilling message displayed in stark, crystalline text. You wanted to watch us die. Now, watch yourselves. The galaxy was thrown into chaos. The invincibility of the Stellar Compact was a lie. The fear they had cultivated for centuries was now turned back on them, magnified 1,000-fold. Fringe worlds, long oppressed under the Compact's thumb, began to whisper of rebellion. Systems that had been ignored or exploited saw a new, terrifying power on the galactic stage, and some began to see an opportunity. Envoys from these forgotten worlds started to arrive at Viridia, not as conquerors, but as supplicants. They came offering alliances, resources, intelligence, anything to curry favor with the monsters who had humbled the gods of the galaxy. We were no longer just survivors. We were becoming an empire born from a plague, built on a foundation of rage, and fueled by a singular, burning desire for retribution. I stood on the Spire's bridge, watching the data streams of a dozen new systems pledging their quiet allegiance to us, and I felt a cold dread mix with my triumph. The path we were on was a dark one. We were becoming the very thing we had once despised, a power that ruled through fear. But every time I looked at Alara, her emerald eyes now holding the weight of 1,000,000 souls. Every time I remembered the cold silence of the Compact's betrayal, the dread would recede, replaced by a hard, unyielding certainty. We had not asked for this war, but by every god, living or dead, we were going to finish it. The age of the Compact was over. The age of the Blight had begun. The victory in the asteroid belt was not an end, but an apotheosis. It transformed us from a myth of whispered horror into a tangible reality. Galactic power. The Stellar Compact, once a monolith of absolute authority, began to crumble, not from our attacks, but from the inside out. Fear is a corrosive acid, and we had poured it into the heart of their empire. Their peace enforcement armada was a shattered wreck, its failure a glaring testament to their weakness. Member species, bound to the Council by treaties and the illusion of shared security, now saw only a decadent, hollow shell. The whispers of rebellion on the fringe worlds grew into open defiance. Systems defaulted on their tithes, ignored council edicts, and began quietly fortifying their own borders. The Compact was paralyzed, its leadership fractured between factions screaming for a massive, galaxy-spanning war and those advocating for a desperate, humiliating negotiation. They were a beast bleeding from 1,000 internal cuts, and we simply watched, sharpening our crystalline claws, and waited. Our new empire, which the galaxy had begun to call the Viridian Blight, grew not through conquest, but through a terrifying form of salvation. We didn't send armies to the systems that pledged allegiance to us. We sent our engineers and our biologists. We sent them the gift of adaptation to worlds with toxic atmospheres. We offered the genetic sequence to filter poison to those on the brink of famine. We provided the means to grow crystalline, nutrient-rich flora in their barren soil. We didn't demand their worship or their loyalty in the old sense. We simply made them part of our ecosystem. We remade them in our own image. To be our ally was to shed your old fragile biology and embrace the strength of the Blight. Was a terrible, seductive offer, survival and power, at the cost of your species' original identity. For worlds that had been ground under the Compact's heel for centuries, it was no choice at all. They embraced the transformation eagerly, becoming willing nodes in our expanding bioorganic network. This was my grand design. I was no longer a scientist. I was a prophet of a new, terrible evolution. From my position in the spire, I oversaw the dissemination of our gifts, tailoring each genetic package to the unique biology of the recipient species. The result was a beautiful, horrifying tapestry of new life. We saw silicon-based humanoids with skin like spun glass, amphibious creatures who could breathe the methane seas of their homeworlds, and avian species whose feathers were now razor-sharp, monomolecular blades of crystal. We were not building an alliance of disparate worlds. We were cultivating a single galaxy-spanning superorganism with Viridia as its heart and mind. Alara was the soul of this new entity. Her empathic abilities had grown exponentially with each new world that joined our network. She was now connected to trillions of minds, a goddess of a new and burgeoning faith. She walked the crystalline corridors of the spire in a state of serene, constant communion, her glowing emerald eyes seeing not just our moon, but 1,000 worlds at once. She was the nexus, the consciousness that bound our monstrous empire together. But I saw the toll it took on her. The last vestiges of the human child I had once known were fading, replaced by a divine, yet sorrowful, detachment. She was carrying the weight of a galaxy on her young shoulders, and the burden was slowly erasing her. The Compact's final, desperate act was not a military strike, but an act of supreme cosmic arrogance. They decided to erase their mistake at its source. They built a weapon, a stellar converter they called the Sun Killer, designed to trigger a premature supernova in our system star. Their logic was insane but simple. If they could not contain the Blight, they would sterilize the entire sector, burning us and our growing empire out of existence, regardless of the collateral damage to dozens of neighboring, inhabited systems. They saw it as a necessary sacrifice, a holy crusade to purify the galaxy of our taint. We knew of the Sun Killer's construction before its final components were even assembled. Our spies were everywhere now, not just individuals, but entire populations, all on Compact-controlled worlds who had secretly accepted our gift and become our eyes and ears. The Compact was blind, deaf, and surrounded by a silent, invisible enemy. We did not move to stop the weapons deployment. We let them bring it to our doorstep. We let their grand fleet, the last of their military might, assemble at the edge of our system, a magnificent, glittering armada of doomed souls. We let their leaders broadcast their final ultimatum, a speech filled with righteous fury, declaring their intent to cleanse this celestial blight with holy fire. We let them have their moment of hubris. We let them believe they were in control. The confrontation took place in the silent void, under the light of the star they intended to kill. Their fleet was a wall of steel and light. Opposite them was a single ship, the World Seed, our newest creation. It was a vessel the size of a moon, grown from the very core of Viridia, a living, beating heart of crystal and bioenergy. I was on its bridge, a vast, cavernous space that felt more like a cathedral than a command center. Kalen stood beside me, his silver eyes fixed on the enemy fleet, and at the center of the chamber, floating in a column of soft, emerald light, was Alara. She was not just our seer now, she was our ultimate weapon. As the Sun Killer began its firing sequence, a lance of pure, incandescent energy building at its core, Alara closed her eyes. She reached out, not with malice, not with anger, but with the full, empathic weight of our collective consciousness. She did not attack their ships. She attacked their minds. She sent a single, silent message across the void, a wave of pure, undiluted truth. She showed them. She showed every being in that fleet, from the Grand Admiral to the lowest engine room menial, the memory of our betrayal. She made them feel the suffocating air of our dying colony. She made them hear the cries of our children. She made them experience the cold, indifferent silence of the compact as we begged for help. Then, she showed them the beauty and the unity of what we had become. She showed them 1,000 worlds, reborn and strong. She showed them a future free from the hypocrisy and decay of the Council. She didn't ask them to surrender. She simply offered them a choice to die for a lie, or to live for a new, unified truth. The effect was more devastating than any weapon. The Compact's fleet, held together by a fragile chain of command and centuries of doctrine, dissolved in an instant of shared, horrifying revelation. We watched as ships turned on each other, as crews mutinied, as commanders, their minds shattered by the truth, simply shut down their engines and drifted in the void. The Sun Killer's firing sequence faltered and died. The Grand Armada of the Stellar Compact was broken not by a cannon, but by an idea. It ended not with a bang, but with a whisper of conscience, long suppressed, finally unleashed. The era of the Council was over. Its authority and its military might evaporating in a single silent moment of galactic epiphany. In the aftermath, there was no victory parade, no celebration. There was only the immense, quiet work of rebuilding. We did not conquer the remnants of the Compact. We absorbed them. World by world, we offered our gift, our cure for the disease of their broken society. Some resisted, but most, weary of war and disillusioned with their old masters, accepted. Our blight was not a plague of death, but a plague of life, of change, of evolution. The galaxy was being reborn. Years later, I stood on the observation deck of the Spire, looking out at a sky filled with the soft, organic lights of our bioluminescent ships. The galaxy was at peace, a unified, interconnected whole. We had achieved a harmony that the Compact, with all its power and its laws, could only ever dream of. But it was the peace of the hive, the harmony of the superorganism, the wild, chaotic, beautiful, and terrible thing that had once been humanity was gone, subsumed into this new, greater whole. I walked to the center of the spire, to the chamber where Alara still floated in her column of light. She was no longer a person. She was a nexus, the consciousness of 1 trillion beings, her face a mask of serene, eternal focus. I placed my hand on the crystalline column, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of her old self, a whisper of the daughter I had lost. A single thought, not in words, but in pure emotion, brushed against my mind. It is done. Father, it is quiet now. I had saved my daughter. I had saved my people. I had forged an empire of monsters to create a lasting peace. But as I stood there, a solitary, aging man in a galaxy of my own making, I felt a profound and unshakable loneliness. I had won the war, but in the process, I had lost the very thing I had once fought so desperately to protect. I was the father of a new form of life, the architect of a new age, but I was also the last human in the universe. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul, that I would die alone.